So I'm making this video um, for the album area of the disability um, that I was granted for my bone marrow transplant. Okay, so currently on disability. I had my bone marrow transplant in 2007. I was diagnosed with severe aplastic anemia, and it is a blood disorder that is very close and almost just like leukemia, but it is exactly not a cancer cell. It's not a cancer cell. Leukemia is an actual cell that travels through your body that accumulates, metastasizes, and whatnot, just depending on what it is. Aplastic anemia is a blood disorder that you don't get enough oxygen, red blood cells, platelets, and white blood cells, platelets, and red blood cells. Red blood cells feed oxygen to the brain. White blood cells fights infection, and you have platelets that help clots blood. So when you have a laceration or an injury, it helps clot blood from you bleeding to death. Oxygen, goes to all your muscles and organs. 80%, I think of it is, goes to your brain. And then you have white blood cells that travel through your bloodstream to fight infections to keep you from getting sick and any bad bacteria. So that's what aplastic anemia affects. And so I got my bone marrow transplant, and my brother was the bone marrow transplant donor. I have two brothers that I grew up with in the same household. I'm the middle brother. I have a younger little brother, and I have an older brother, and we all grew up in the same house. Both of them were a perfect match. My brother is 6 to 7 years younger than me. My older brother is about 4 years older than me. So my little brother, when I was 23, he was 17 years old. He donated his blood because I needed to find a match. He donated his blood willingly so that my blood would be restarted and I would be healthy. And of all the risk, I made a full recovery, nearly died multiple times in the hospital, and I had to go through chemotherapy. When I went through chemotherapy, I lost all my hair. I plumped up because of the steroids, and the chemotherapy nearly killed me, and in the hospital. But I wanted to make this video. I wanted to make this video because I got granted the SSDI, which is Social Security Disability Insurance. And that insurance I did not get granted until I was 35 years old. I had my bone marrow transplant when I was 23 years old in 2007. Okay? So for 12 years they would not allow me to get granted. I didn't even first apply for it until I was about 28 years old, and they told me that I don't know, to my understanding, I never understood the Social Security Department. I just understood that the Social Security Department, everyone pays taxes, and when somebody is an American citizen and they get sick, they automatically do an evaluation, and if you get granted that money, that's what pays for your well-being and your medical bills, including if you ever get placed in a nursing home. Like if you get into a car wreck and you're a paraplegic, or you get severe brain damage and you don't have anybody to take care of you, that's what pays the nursing home. And then regardless if you have any credit or not of any money that you've accumulated, and that's, I think, from the age of 18 or older, 18 and younger. I'm not sure what insurance programs they have, but I guess they have something else going on where somebody has to build up enough credit in order to qualify for Social Security Disability, which I've never even heard of, but I guess that's what they told me. So they didn't allow me to have disability until I was 35 years old. I've heard dozens and dozens of stories of people telling me personally horror stories of the Social Security Department of not wanting to grant people money, giving people that didn't deserve it money, and people were dying in a nursing home or dying in real life of a disease and actually die, and they weren't getting granted the money that they needed. So I've heard a lot of stories about that, and a lot of people told me, anybody that I've ever talked to about the Social Security office has never said anything good about them. But I got lucky enough, and I finally built up enough credit after being homeless for about 5 years solid, only basically begging for jobs, living underneath bridges, nonstop. And so I still ended up homeless even when after my disability, but that's what I was granted when I was 35 years old. I've heard of people getting lawyers and getting back pay of $40,000, $50,000, and I never got a lawyer. I could have probably gotten a lawyer and a lot of money, but I didn't because I was so desperate for the money. You don't understand what type of abuse these people were doing to me and the surveillance that had been put on me by these individuals that are targeting me. So it made me really difficult to really take care of myself. So anyway, I've been granted this money. I'm 41 years old now. I turned 42 January 6, 2026. That's in about 2 months from now. I will be turning 42 years old, and that would make it, close to about 7 years that I've been on disability insurance. My bone marrow transplant, who paid for it? When I was working for a company called Standard Register, I had really good insurance that I was paying for, medical insurance. I don't remember the name of it. I just know it was a really good insurance. It was a really good insurance, but I was paying monthly out of my weekly out of my paycheck for medical insurance. Well, I ended up getting sick. They did their evaluation and their insurance paperwork, whatever, and they found out that I qualified so that the insurance would pay. It was almost $500,000. Let me repeat that. $500,000 to keep me alive. And that's what the insurance paid the hospital. That was with chemotherapy, that was the transplant, that was the doctor visits, that was the medication, that was a whole, and I was only in the hospital for about 3.5 weeks, almost a full month. I was almost in the hospital for a full month from the beginning to the very end, and then they could send me home. And believe me, when I went home to take care of myself, it was, I probably should have had a caretaker. I probably should have even still been in the hospital, but for those that know, the hospital is always very quick to push people out the door if you don't have to be there, because it costs a lot of money and they have to save the space for someone else. So I was at the hospital, and so I had my transplant. It was $500,000. It was just under, almost. It was like $440,000. I looked at the paperwork after like maybe 6 months to a year after it happened, and I looked at the paperwork, and it was a total estimate about $440,000. And that did not include what I had to pay out of pocket. Medication that I had to pay was, all the medication that I had to pay for was close to about $1,500 just out of pocket. And that was something that is as good as the insurance that I had, it still didn't even cover that amount. So I ended up having this completed. When I went home to have my bone marrow transplant, no one took care of me, okay? No one did. No one called me to see if I was okay, alive, other than my brother. I had a couple of brothers that called me. That was it. And they called me once or twice. And my brother, Julian, who was the bone marrow transplant donor, who is an identical twin, he stayed with me for about 2 weeks, for a week and a half, because the doctors requested him to stay at my apartment in case I died. Because when you go home after a transplant, there's a lot of complications that can happen that you don't know what can happen, because the doctors still don't know. They just know you're stable enough to go home, but there could still be something that goes wrong. And there was a few things that ended up going wrong. But he stayed with me just to make sure I wasn't going to be dead. and then he took off, right? He left. But my brother basically just stayed on the couch. He really didn't do anything. I had to take care of my entire self. When I took my medication, and I was trembling, like severely sick. I had to do this all by myself. Whenever my brother did drive my car a couple of times to go pick up medication, and that was pretty much it. So that's what my brother Julian did. Now, I want to make this very clear as well. I never knew, and I don't know if I could get a lawyer that could be applying this authority lawyer at the hospital, because the hospital never told me that my brother Julian Alexander Paloma, who was a bone marrow transplant donor for my transplant, blood bone marrow transplant, he was an identical twin. No one ever told me this. They gave me his blood without ever telling me he was a blood bone marrow transplant, that he's an identical twin. So what happens with his blood is, for those that don't know what bone marrow transplant is they take his blood, bone marrow, out of his back hip, and it's out of your bone. The center of your bone has like a milky type of marrow, and it is a bunch of cells, and and the chemotherapy suppresses your immune system, breaks down your own system to basically a cold, and the hospital could kill me. I'm not kidding you. It's really sterilized. A cold could kill you, and they then give my brother's blood to my body, and his blood basically restarts my bone marrow, my blood, and it starts reproducing the correct amount of blood that it's supposed to produce to keep me alive. So during this situation with this bone marrow transplant that he ended up giving me, I never knew. Like I said, he was an identical twin. I don't know why the doctors or nobody ever told me. My brother had reasons to probably keep quiet about it, and I know he did. He had good reasons, but it wasn't against me personally. It had to do something else, and I'm not going to go over on the camera on this. But the hospital probably should have told me this. But basically, I'm my brother's DNA. So if they were to pull blood out of me, I'm my brother's DNA. My blood matches exactly his blood, and you can only do that with identical twins. Like even identical twins, they have, I think, even a different type of blood. Like even just at the smallest levels. But I'm not sure exactly. But I just know twins have identical genes, except just a few different changes in it. And it's the closest how you can basically clone the blood. So I'm exactly my brother's blood. I'm a 99.99% his DNA. But I thought it was important for me to talk about this, that this is how I've been granted my disability insurance, SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance. I had to go through a tremendous amount of unbelievable evidence that I had to collect on my own and wait for 6 months before I got approved. And I applied for it twice, and they denied me. And on the third time, they granted it to me. I couldn't believe that they even wanted to deny me. This was unbelievable, astounding evidence that I had that, I had a transplant. It's the biggest, they consider it the biggest organ transplant in the human body. And it's actually much more dangerous, is what I was told, to have a bone marrow transplant, than it is any of the vital organs in your human body, than it is to have a liver or a kidney or a stomach or whatever organ. It's actually more dangerous because you're dealing with a lot of cells and a lot of different micro organisms and all kinds of cells inside the body at microscopic levels. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. But I did make that recovery, and I want to put this on video so that for those that kind of get an idea of what I had to go through. I had to take cyclosporin, which was a very toxic drug. I had to take steroids, which I was always wanting to cut off the steroids very soon in life, because I was always really against any enhancement drugs when I've always been a naturalist, kind of eating type of person. I didn't want to take drugs to enhance my body. So as soon as I could get off of it, I, was off of steroids, other than just when my doctor told me, which the steroids basically flourishes your hair, and just kind of makes you gain weight, you gain muscle faster, but it's a different kind of steroids. It's the steroids that they give at the hospital, so it's in pill form. But it left me in debt still, with a couple $1,000s I still had to pay, because of all the money the insurance was paying, I still had to pay. Like, after a couple of visits, it still left me like $1,000 in debt. I think it was not 2,000. I think it was about $1,000. But that was after I spent $1,200, $1,500 of medication, because I had other complications where I had to make more trips, get off work, and that was like the first 2 months in recovery and getting the medication all balanced. But I took care of myself the entire time. Okay, there was no pat on the back. There was no one. I had one friend of mine, best friend of mine, childhood friend of mine, that I had in the hospital. I didn't tell anybody when my bone marrow transplant happened. I just told a few friends, and I told them it was. They told me I was going to die. I had a year to live. If I didn't have a transplant, if I didn't do anything, I had less than a year to live. It was terminal. I was going to die. So they gave me some options. They had a bone marrow transplant. They had like some alternative solutions. They had also two different type of bone marrow. They had a rabbit serum that they told me that they get rabbit blood and they mix it in some sort of chemicals inside the rabbit blood, and then they apply it to the human body, and it helps boost the system. There's also a horse serum. They get horse blood, and then they put some chemicals or they put something in this horse blood, and then they apply it to the patient to help reboost. Now, aplastic anemia, which I had my bone marrow transplant, it gets treated on oncology. That means it gets treated with the cancer patients, almost exactly like the cancer patients. But for me, it's not technically a cancer. It's not a cancer cell, because it's actually a malfunction of the DNA that causes, for some reason, not to build any of that. But they really don't even know what causes it. But it's not actually a cancer cell. So, I'm around cancer patients all the time. Like, I see them, cancer patients that are sick and dying, and other people that are very sick, or people that didn't make it in the hospital. I got treated at UT Southwestern Medical Center by Dr. Rivera-Scala, and I don't know how to pronounce her first name, Madeira, but it's Rivera-Scala is her doctor, that the head doctor, an Indian doctor from India, and her team. They sent me to Zale Lipsy, which is a bone marrow transplant unit where they send anybody who has a transplant goes there, from UT Southwestern Medical Center. This is in 2007. So when I went to Zale Lipsy, which is right next door to Parkland, that's where I got treated. I was there for a month, and then I left, and it was over with. So I thought I'd make a video on this to kind of explain my disability. They made it, disability office made it I couldn't believe that they were even denying me twice before they granted it to me. I had to get boxes of paperwork, and it still wasn't enough for them. They were trying to find reasons not to help me, not to give me money, to deny me, and they did. I was checking, calling them every month, every 3 weeks, every 2 weeks, like I was supposed to, hoping to get any answers. I gave them x-rays of my brain, my ribs. I gave them blood work, paperwork. I gave them boxes, scans that I got whenever I was in the hospital, written letters from the doctor, everything you can name. that I was giving these people at the Social Security office in Dallas, Texas, so that I would be granted this disability. And finally, after 6 months, they granted it to me, and I didn't get any back pay for those for 3 or 4 or 5 years that do get them. They just paid me for the minute that I applied, and for the 6 months they denied me, they did pay me for those for like, it was like 5 months or something like that. But that's what the reason that I get disability. Now, I've had other states that I've moved into that they have tried to take away my disability, and this is strictly because of the homosexuals and transgenders that are going inside the offices and screwing up the paperwork and sabotaging me. I'm not kidding you. When I initially applied for disability, I don't have to do this, but I wrote a 20-page essay. I'm not kidding you, from top to bottom, writing to them in 20 pages and listing also items that why my disability affected me. Even though, like, when you go to the disability office and you apply, there's certain diseases you automatically qualify for if you have a disease. Like if you have aplastic anemia, you have leukemia, you have brain surgery, you have paraplegic, there's like AIDS. You have all these different types of different names of diseases that automatically qualify, and they still wanted to deny me. I mean, it was incredible. But I gave them all the paperwork, and I wrote a 20-page essay explaining every detail and everything you can imagine, and they finally granted it to me. But I don't have to write a 20-page essay out of my own ability to. I had to and wanted to try to convince them even more and show even more proof on top of the doctor notes, the x-rays, the medical paperwork, the examiner's office, the physicians. I gave them literally it was like box, just paperwork and CDs, and they were just still wanting to linger and take their time, making it very hard for me. They do a review on me every, I think it's like 4 to 5 years. My disease will never leave me. For some reason, they do that with everybody. I think they even do that with people that are quadriplegics who can't even walk or can't move their arms. They still do a review on them. It's still automatically, everyone has to get a review every 4 to 5 years. So my next review isn't in 2000, and that's not until 2029. That's what I was told. And when I was in Vermont 2 years ago, they told me that they were doing a review, and when I was in Barre, Vermont, and I had to write them another 10 to 15-page essay, and they were figuring out ways to try to deny me from disability. I mean, it was unbelievable about the actual trouble and efforts that I was trying to get just to try to get this little money to try to survive and pay for my food expenses and rent. Regardless, y'all know the story. Everywhere I moved, people would just rob me for money. So the disability that they would just steal from me. So I'm granted that for the rest of my life. It's not to say that someone can do something to sabotage it and take my disability away permanently. And not permanently, but just take it away just because they feel like it. And they've tried to. So my plastic anemia never goes away. There's no cure. There's absolutely no cure for it anymore. Not anymore. There's never been a cure. So the only thing they do is a bone marrow transplant, and you have a bunch of side effects for the most part. But it was very difficult because I lost the ability to physically run when I was about early 24 years old. I was about 24. I had my bone marrow transplant and went home to my apartment, and it was the last few months. I was like somewhere October when I went back to work of 2007. It was just a few months before I turned 24. And my hair finally grew back when I was somewhere around the holidays. And then January, I turned 24. I'm exercising. And the bone marrow, there's they call it a horse needle. It's a huge horse needle about this big and very large girth needle. And it's just like a needle, but I guess they call it a horse needle because they place it in horses. And they place it and they pull out the bone marrow. and so they used it to pull the bone marrow out of me to do a biopsy. A biopsy is where I've had two or three different biopsies, meaning they put a needle into my hip and they pull bone marrow and they take it to a laboratory to see what the cells look like and what's everything that's going on. So they did that. The doctor told me that sometimes there's damage, and there was. The doctor, I don't think it was Vera Scala. She didn't actually do the biopsy. It was someone else. But someone that did the biopsy on me, however they did, they either hit a vessel or a nerve or damaged the bone or chipped into the bone or did something, but it crippled me. I did everything you can imagine. I used to work out and be an athlete all the time. And, play soccer for, 6-7 years. Played basketball as a kid. I was, very active. I did everything to try to fix it. I couldn't run. I physically could not run more than, maybe more than, 30 or say 40 to 60 yards before it crippled me where I couldn't run anymore. And that happened when I was 24. So every time I went to a job site, I was in pain and I couldn't move and I couldn't run. And it affected my job positions that I worked at. It really did. It didn't matter. I had to suffer in pain like that because disability wouldn't give me disability. And I had to go back to work regardless if I was in pain. And I couldn't tell my employers that I was in pain because then I wouldn't have work. And they would fire me because if they saw an injury, they thought, well, just get rid of him. He's worthless. So that's what happened. And I thought I'd make a video on this because it's crucially important. As far as it goes with my disability insurance and me paying Medicare, I canceled it very early on because I can't afford it because I'm always being thrown to the streets. So what I do, if there's a state that I move to, every time that I move to a state, not all states do this, sometimes they pay for Medicare. I apply for Medicare and then Medicaid or whatever it is I have to apply there, and then they pay for the Medicare so that I don't have to have the $185 deducted from my paycheck disability, and I have medical insurance. But other than that, it doesn't cover dental. It just covers a lot of the basics. But I thought I'd make a video on this. It was horrific. I do not have. I took several pictures. I probably had a total of, probably 40 or 50 pictures that when I was in the hospital, bald, and whenever I was in the hospital dying, and a couple videos. But they're lost forever. Everything got deleted. I have no pictures. I have nothing that's from the hospital. It all got deleted and lost forever. Unless somebody somehow saved them on some sort of hard drive or whatever. But I deleted all of it on the websites and whatnot to just kind of move on from that. So, but anyway, I thought it was important. I initially applied in Dallas, Texas, when I applied for disability, and I had to do everything on my own. Everything, filling out the paperwork alone. I went to a few lawyers asking them how the things kind of go with me applying. I've heard most people when I was in my early 20s, before I had my transplant, when I was 20, 21, 19 years old, they always said that when you try to get on Social Security disability, you always have to hire a lawyer and you'll get a bunch of back pay. I've heard of people getting paid $60,000, $80,000 because they got a lawyer and the Social Security had to pay them. But they always told me, but I didn't. I was just grateful to have that little bit of money, just pay for rent and pay for food, to not dig in trash cans for food. It will never replace the unbelievable hatred and death wishes that came from the Social Security office employees, from the people on the streets, and everywhere I went. Not almost there, but it was about 85% to 90% of the people consistently saying some of the most death wish and disgusting things you can imagine. Um, it would never replace the spitting, the death wishes that people were saying to my face, the trash throwing when I was I was living underneath a bridge when I was waiting to get on disability insurance. I was literally living off Romans and noodles, getting hot water over at a 7-Eleven, living underneath a slimy bridge, sleeping at a 120-degree angle, and it wasn't a freezing temperature, but it was close to. It was about 45 to 40 degrees, freezing, very cold and rainy outside. I'm living underneath the bridge. It doesn't replace any of that. So, like I said, it was a very big hassle, but you won't even believe that what I went through to try to get that money. And it was just survival money. That's all it was. I got it at 35 years old. At 35 years old, what was that, 6 years ago, almost 7, so we're in 2025. I got granted that money in 2018, 2018 to 2019, I got granted that money. I had my transplant when I was 23 years old, not when I was 35, and they still wouldn't grant me that financial money. But I don't know. I don't know if somebody was lying to me. I still strictly believe they were lying to me, and deter me from that. But I was always told that anybody that ever gets sick, that's permanently sick, you automatically qualify, because everyone that stays healthy and anybody that works pays a little bit of Social Security, and you don't ever get that money until you're going to retirement, which is like 67 years old. 66 or 67 years old. I think it's 68 years old now. But when you retire, you get that money. Until then, unless you get sick or permanently disabled, you will never be granted that money. Where does that money go? If you don't ever get sick and you die before the age of 68, well, that money is there so that for the people that do end up quadriplegic or paralyzed or get on, leukemia, or get a cancer that's lethal and terminal, or something that get brain damage and they have to be placed in the hospital and they never worked their whole life. So if you're 19 years old, you never had a job, you get in a car wreck and you get severe brain damage and you can't take care of yourself anymore and you don't have family or money, then you get granted that from the disability office, that money. And then they pay the Social Security then pays the nursing home to take care of your life until you're dead. That's the way that I understood it. But apparently they were telling me that you work and you get so many more credits or whatever every couple amount of money that you earn, and eventually you can qualify for it. I find that to be very unbelievable, not the truth. As much as hard work and hours as I put in my early 20s, mid to my entire 20s, and I didn't qualify until I was 35. But that's what they told me. It didn't make any sense, but I still don't believe it to this very day. But anyway, I thought I'd make a video so it gives a little bit of an explanation of the disability that I earn and the money and how I travel, how I go to places, how I end up on the streets and broke, because it only pays me $1,365, just about. And with that money, I have to pay everything on my own. And that is, rent is obviously, for the world that I live in, is very different. For those who don't understand, they're charging me $600-700 everywhere I fucking goddamn go, and they're not letting me have an apartment or nothing. But I have to survive off $600 a month, and that has to cover for my food. You know how expensive food is at a grocery store to eat healthy? $600 doesn't make the cut to eat very healthy. It just doesn't pay enough. It's very difficult, especially when you live out of a backpack only like I do. It's very expensive. So that's how I pay. That's how I end up getting food and traveling. And I still ended up sleeping on the streets a number of times, because all the money that I was able to save and I travel, which end up going to waste, I end up going to places that only ended up giving me some sort of life credit because of other circumstances that have been placed me in, the entrapment that people have done to me, and being in the public eye and being scolded by society, by the tens of thousands of people. So I have to get the attention of people that actually have some sort of mindset that there is some sort of higher creation and believe in kindness and believe in love. believe in a God that is healthy and giving to people. And that's not what this place was when I was alive. So I thought it was important for me to go to places, you know, Hawaii, where Pearl Harbor happened, New York, you know, and even when I was on disability. But I was literally surviving for 6 or 7 years being homeless. Even during that time, you know, because I didn't have enough money, I could eat more luxury sleeping on the streets. But then I just have, you know, then I wouldn't have a place to live. But if I had a place to live, I couldn't eat very well. So it was better to eat better and good food and better food than and sleep outside than it was, because the food is really expensive and travel expenses and clothing and trying to take care of myself. But when I traveled to Alaska, living in freezing temperatures, when I was living in Seattle, Washington, when I was in Denver, Colorado, and Colorado Springs, and I was in Dallas, Texas, living underneath bridges and you know, 90 to 5-degree temperatures and at night, you know, with roaches and snakes and horrible situations out of a backpack, I was literally living off like $70 every 2 weeks. I was sleeping outside, and I would apply for every job you can imagine. I would apply for all my jobs on Indeed, send 100 applications. I'd send about 30 applications every 2 or 3 days. And somebody would hire me for 1 day, for 2 days. I'd earn 50 or 60 bucks doing labor work, you know, physical labor work. Most of it was pretty difficult, paying me shit money, paying me $11 an hour, $10 an hour. Just enough so I didn't have to dig in trash cans physically for food, or just start begging off the corner of a street for fucking money because they wouldn't allow me to work. So that's what they do. They kept me on the trash can, living next to the trash can for 5 years. They just kept on throwing a few pennies at me just so I wouldn't throw, just so they were just saying, look, haha, look what I did to you, look what I'm giving you. And they never allowed me to have one job more than, you know, I haven't had it. Like I said, I have not. If you look at my resume album as well, it'll have some more information there. Keep in mind, I'm 42 years old in 2 months. It's been 15 years, and I can verify this with tax documents. 15 years that I have not been allowed and persecuted and targeted to not have a job more than 7 or 8 weeks, which is about 2 months in any job site. Any single job site in 15 years. I have a world record for the number of jobs I've applied. You know, I know it has to be in the U.S. I have every major website you can imagine, Monster.com, Jobs.com, Career Builder, all these different websites, Indeed.com. I have apps where I was just on Indeed, just sending 20 applications every couple weeks. Nobody would hire me, and they were not allowing me to work. They were just keeping me in the trash, and they did dwindle my life and youth away. There was nothing that I could do, absolutely nothing that I could do. But I thought I'd make a video on this in my efforts to try to survive and make the better of life, and they wouldn't let me do anything. There was just there are other circumstances that were going on with this, but I think it's important for me to talk about, because I'm always getting blood work done every 3 to 4 months at least. Any place I'm at, I'm always getting blood work 3 to 4 months just to check my blood, just to be able to see what I'm always preoccupied about my health, even prior before my bone marrow transplant. And it's good, because I think everybody should, because there's a lot of cancers and diseases. I've heard of stories, people getting cancer, and within 60 days they're dead, and they were healthy. And they got cancer. They had a very, very fast metastasizing cancer, and it developed. They never got checked until they got sick, and when they went to the doctor and when they were already feeling very bad, it was too late. It was already in the late stages of that cancer, and it was terminal. They couldn't do anything. So I always get checked, just to make sure, see what my blood is doing, how my liver's working, how my heart. I recently had a heart scan. I recently had a colonoscopy done, which is very disgusting and painful. I was actually passed out of sleep, but Other than that, I got brain scans done. Always trying to do the best I can to take care of myself. Um, but it's all by myself. No one's ever there. I believe in God, but like I said, but as far as my disability goes, that's the whole story to the situation. I'm allowed to have a part-time job while I'm on disability insurance, and I can't exceed more than, I think it's like $1,400 or something like that. It's like anywhere from $1,200 to $1,400 a month. I can't exceed more than that for the rest of my life. I can't. They won't let me have any more money than that. So I have to stay at that amount. So given the fact that I stay at that amount, I could only work at full-time jobs and part-time jobs that only allow me to earn that amount of money. But I have a few credits that let me go. I have like 6 or 7 months of credit that let me go over that just for a trial period, and that's just, I still haven't wasted those yet, but that's what they told me. But anyway, that's the regulations. Every time the Social Security office tells me, every fax paper and every paycheck that I have ever gotten, I always filed all my taxes. I don't owe any taxes, and I always faxed my paychecks every single time. Every single paycheck, even if it was just 5 hours, even if it was just 2 hours. I make a copy of the paycheck, and I send them and I fax it to the Social Security office. I write the information, my date of birth, my name, reason I no longer work there, or that I no longer work there, and the last day that I worked there and when I started. Every single time. The Social Security office keeps track of every penny and everything I make. And if I don't report my paycheck to them, they have a way to look on their computer system to see if I'm hiding money, if I'm making a lot more money, because there's a lot of criminals and bad people out there that they get on disability insurance, and when they get on disability insurance, they're not really sick. They were never sick. They lied the whole time, and they were on disability insurance for 6, 7, 10 years, and they stole a bunch of money. So that's why, because for people like that to do that, make it hard for people like me that actually did get sick and do have a disability. So, like I said, I thought I'd make a video, post this, and kind of inform. So, that's kind of what's going on. And look for my other albums and my other pictures here on my Facebook. It'll be pictures all over the place you'll have, and videos explaining just the separate album that I'll be talking about, to elaborate about what's going on in the world that I live in. It's not to say that they can take away my disability at any given time, make an excuse, find a reason, because there's so much corruption that's happening and targeting that's happening against me.